Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the worst 1995 Fleer card designs. And I know what you're thinking, that is about as redundant of a statement as you're going to ever find. And that's not entirely true, because in the case of the 1995 Fleer designs, we tend to think of that as one of the worst card sets ever, because it is. It was a big jumbled mess of lots of different designs that really, it just looked terrible. But in that whole list of, or in that collection of designs, there are some that are actually not that bad. Some that are pretty good. Not necessarily for regular sets, but for interesting inserts, some of them really do come through fairly well. So I wanted to look at the worst of list, or the worst of all these designs, but I also want to look at the best designs, which of course is going to be in a separate video. So and it is interesting to look at the different ways that they played around with these, again, often very, very terrible designs, because they were playing around with different concepts, and sometimes between one sport and another, they did not repeat any of these designs, but they would take a design and they would adjust it between one of the sets to another set. And it is interesting to see how those evolve and the difference between how they come across. And on this list, there are two designs that are very, very similar where we actually get to see that. But yeah, obviously, since this card set is designed, or is known for being as terrible as it is, there are a lot of terrible designs to look at, and this is that glorious exploration. Now, there are 20 different designs between all four sports. There are 6, 6, 4, and 4. I could do 10 and 10. I'm only going to do 8 and 8. So there are going to be 4 designs I don't even look at. So this will be a list of the 5 worst as well as 3 honorable mentions. The same will happen for the best of. And where we start off with is a card that I actually kind of like. I don't think it's a good design, but I kind of like. For hockey, for the Central Division, I think it's called the Central Division, this is a card that I just love. I absolutely love the colors on this card. Of all of these cards, this is the one that I actually like looking at. Now, it's not a good design. It's got a whole bunch of stuff on it. The text is, really redundant, because they do have gold foil for the text for the player's name as well. But the text for the player's name, not good. The logo for the team is not helping the card out. The whole background is just way too much. But again, the colors are really, really strong, and I really like that. I also like that the player is very distinct on this card, which is going to be something to take note of. My next honorable mention is actually, it's an A and B. It's 2 designs where one is a little bit better than the other. The better of these 2 designs is for baseball. The AL Western Division card is a card where I like what they were trying to do. Having the 2 panels for the background is really good. I like the clarity of the player on one side, and then the other side is where the main shot of the player comes through. And all of that works in a way that should be successful, except the background of the main panel is that photo negative approach where they have a distorted color scheme for it. I've never really understood why this has been used in any setting other than something that's kind of high-end provocative art. It really doesn't come through well on these cards, because the card, when I look at the card, I want to look at the player, and I want for the player to be really distinct. And like I said, the 2 images work really well in a way that I think could have carried along with this card. But unfortunately, that background is a bit distracting. Not overpowering, but it's a bit distracting. And so it tempers the ability for the card to look good. But this is actually the improved version, because if we look at what they did in hockey in the previous release with their Atlantic Division, this is a card that shows that we were actually pretty lucky. Now, the player's really distinct, but it's the side panel where now the side panel is entirely that negative color distortion thing. This is a card that bothers me. Every time I look at these cards bother me, because that effect is a more dominant part of the card. And we're going to be getting back to this whole effect as well. not too long down the road, but it's one I just don't understand why they bothered to do. They were playing around with a bunch of stuff, so sure. But I feel that in both of these cases, they kind of ruined a very good potential. So those are my honorable mentions. Now I move into the list of the 5 worst. And the first of the cards that I'm looking at here is also with hockey. And in this case, it's the Northeast Division with a Stipple art card that is a complete catastrophe. Now, Stipple art is a great opportunity for art. And if done right, it's incredible. We saw that with the Team Pinnacle cards just a couple years earlier. So it's not like stipple art can't work well. And in fact, I mentioned about how sometimes they would take a design and slightly tweak it. Well, this is a great example. One of the better designs in football is a stipple background. But what it's not is a stipple image. And that's what we have here, where we have for the background a close, tight shot of the player, well, same shot of the player, but all in stipple, but more importantly, all monochromatic with a hue that is lousy. All of the cards in this theme don't look good. I mean, none of them look good. And it's a real shame that that's the case, because the player is clear. He is strong on this card. Well, he is sort of strong. He is somewhat strong because whenever I look at the card, the background grabs my attention and holds me in. And because the colors I don't think were selected well, it has not really an icky feeling as much as it almost feels like it's aged, like it hasn't, someone's left it out in the sun and it's been losing some of its color. They just don't look good. So it's a case of something where it was a noble idea, but the color's the big problem. At the end of the day, it comes down to the color. Why did they choose the particular hues that they did? It totally ruined it. So at number 4, I go back over to baseball, and in this case, I think it's the Central Division for the AL. And for this set, it is just, oh my word, I'm lost in the thought process of what they were trying to do. Because look, the image of the player should read strong. I mean, in the case of this card, there's no question that the player should be really strong. And yet he's buried in this card because the background is just as strong as he is. And there's no clear delineation between the two. But then you have the text at the top and the bottom, and it's also at the exact same color temperature and energy. And they have like an image in the text, and then there's the background behind. So you can't even read the text, which begs the question of why is the text there? This is one of the greatest examples of a card that does everything so much that nothing is happening. You can't see anything on these cards. Wow, it's designing something a little bit understated is so good because it gives you a chance to breathe. But when you just shove everything in there, and this isn't even that cumbersome, but it's just that everything they shoved in there is just totally overpowering. The card's completely lost, complete waste of time, really, really bad. And it's only at number 4, which gives you an idea of what's coming up. And what's coming up in number 3 is we're heading over to basketball with the Central, I think it's the Central Division, Midwest, something like that. I really don't know the conference names that well. So it's basically all of the teams around the Great Plains. And that is actually, the Great Plains is a good way of thinking about it because this card is so, it's boring, so boring. I mean, the background is intended to be interesting, but you can tell here with this card that this gives a great opportunity to really see just what's going on this card, which is not good at all. It is way too much, way too strong of just stuff thrown on there. It really convolutes the card. Now, you can look at the David Robinson card and see that there's actually a fair amount of potential with these cards where if it's done in the right way, then you don't see that stuff. But that's the problem, is you got to get rid of the design stuff for the card to work. If the design stuff is there, it's a bunch of graffiti. It's a bunch of distractions, and there's nothing aesthetic about it. If this was something that was up on somebody's office wall, I could understand it. I wouldn't understand the reasoning for it, but I would understand why it's there, because industrial art like this there's an aesthetic concept behind it. But this is a sports card. That's totally different. And so in this case, it just looks like a garbled mess, like somebody drew on it, like a 2-year-old drew on it. That's the way that it looks. That's not what I want to see in a card. I want to see a card that looks somewhat professional, and oh boy, this is not. Number 2, I'm staying with basketball, and in this case, I'm going over to the Atlantic Division, Eastern Division. I think it's the Eastern Division. Again, I have a tough time with the names of the conferences. So with this particular division, this card gets back to that negative image approach with the distorted colors, and it is just so horrendous. In this case, because they took the stipple art design and they combined those two together. And it means that whenever I look at the card, I see the not great colors, the distorted image, the really tight shot of the player for the background, and I don't really see the player up front. Now, there are occasions where these cards can potentially look good, like the Penny Hardaway card is a card that I acknowledge I almost like, roughly speaking. But outside of the Penny Hardaway, just about all the rest of these cards just look, they look bad. They just look bad. I've been trying to figure out how to describe it, and I don't think I need to. I think it's pretty obvious. But it's not number 1. And the reason for that is because the number 1 worst card for me, for Fleer 1995, is from baseball, and it is the NL Eastern Conference, where these cards are, or Eastern Division, excuse me, these cards, when I looked at this card, I went, oh, cool, a Provision card. Oh, heck no, that's not a Provision card. I wish it was a Provision card, because a Provision card, the art may not be good, but at least there's an interest to it. In this case, that whole background, again, we're going with the same thing. The background is overpowering. It's just like the one we just saw. It's just like what we talked about earlier. The background is overpowering because it has enough intricacy to it. Well, actually, no, it's not always intricate, because in some cases, the background hardly even exists, but oh boy, do the colors exist. And that's the thing with this card, is that this is a card, unlike previous examples, where the background is so heavily stylized and overpowering in its colors that the player gets lost, but so does the viewer. It burns your retina. When you look at it, what do you even look at? There's really nothing to look at. And the background is drawing your attention to nothing, to boredom, to bleakness. I want to see the picture of the player. Why is it asking too much to do that? I don't know, but Fleer thought it was too much, so that's what we ended up with. And that is my list of the worst of the 1995 Fleer card designs. Now, I imagine that a lot of you are really curious what the best of is going to be like. That'll be in, I think, a month and a half when I'll finally get around to doing that. And I think you'll be surprised with how some of the designs actually come through better than you realize. So definitely look out for that video. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And thank you very much for watching.